what actually makes a good book? As an agent, what makes a good book?
Good question. And I ask that every month at the event. What makes a good book? What are you looking for? And they say, agents and publishers say lots of different things, but what they all uniformly say is, we want new voices, we want a fresh take on an old subject or a completely new subject. We want to hear something that moves me. I want to hear something that I've never read before. And sometimes that's a little bit irritating to hear after you've written 70,000 words and worked your bottom off, like editing and all that, to hear that. Hang on, that's not concrete enough. That doesn't sound like a great work of literature or whatever, of non-fiction. But what they mean is they want good enough writing, and sometimes not brilliant writing, good enough writing, but then the extra things I've just mentioned. So like, great voice, something new, something inspiring, something that connects us and makes you want to turn the pages.
So really it's the sense of getting to the heart of something. So it's not just the words, it's actually getting to the heart, the ethos beyond it. Is a good book the same as a bestseller, basically? Do you think?
No. So that, do we want to punch up?
Yeah.
I mentioned a book that, I can name it. So 50 Shades of Grey. Lots of publishers and agents were sort of in uproar about that because they thought it wasn't a good enough book to be worthy of being a bestseller. Other agents and publishers were sorry it wasn't them who commissioned it and published it. Don't we all get a bit irritated if something that we don't think is great is dominating? And that's actually the thing. It's not about the fact that you resent anybody's success. It's just that when something does become really huge, it dominates and it can lead trends.
That's quite, because obviously in your book, I think it was published 2014.
Ooh.
Writing a bestseller, a masterclass. I know it's got a wider title, but that dynamic was something really important you talked about, and I know that part of that was kind of getting to the heart of the subject matter. Do you think the idea of writing a bestseller, you've defined it in two ways, obviously. One is what makes a good book, and then one is what makes a bestseller. Do you think there's a different dynamic there in between how the publishing industry sees things and how readers see things? How those connections are made, that bridge?
Are just looking for the next thing. We've got to remember that some people read 2 books a year, and some people like you and I probably read in excess of 200 a year, and that's not talking about work, that's just privately, what we read. So we're different beasts. Some readers are looking for particular genres, but people who don't read very often, they just want something that shouts at them and says, read me, and they want to engage in that way. So they're not really bothered. Word of mouth is another thing. This is something I mentioned quite a lot in the book, is and Andrew Crofts, who's the most brilliant ghostwriter, lovely man, he says that actually it's the word of mouth factor to make a bestseller. And so if you can get people talking, what does it matter whether it's literary or tying people up in bondage or whatever,
A mixture of both.
Who cares? As long as if it gets you talking, that usually means there's something deep enough to want to go, oh God, I haven't thought about it in this way. I hadn't thought about life like that. And with 50 Shades, let's go back to that. Yes, it was a bestseller. Yes, some people thought it wasn't particularly well done or whatever, but it raised that conversation. We hadn't talked about bondage publicly for a long time, or that kind of relationship between men and women. I think we hadn't talked about those relationships for a long time, in that very public way. So for me, that's job done. And so in a way, if it starts a conversation, doesn't it deserve to be bestseller?
Absolutely, and I think I think that dynamic of actually the reader setting the tone, but only actually if they get the input, because if they don't get the book, if they don't get to read something, how can they set it? And of course that's the advent of digital technology creating that opportunity. And I know, you're really passionate about the democratisation of the publishing industry and actually how we access material. I know you're from a working class background, aren't you? Does that help shape that to some degree, that passion for kind of getting writers the opportunity.
Possibly, because I mean, Kit Duval has started up some kind of organisation around working class writers. The thing is, there are barriers, right? Yeah. There are barriers to any writer because you have to jump through the hoops of literary agent and then publisher. Yeah. But if you come from working class or other marginalised background, then there might be some key pieces that you don't understand because of where you're coming from that create an extra barrier on top of what everyone else is experiencing. So,
no, and again, I think, creating those experiences, understanding how those experiences work, and then translate into something that people can connect to, I think is critical. And I mean, we'll talk a little bit about Libraro a little bit later on in terms of that triangulation between the readers and the writers and the industry, and actually that kind of new way of making stuff happen digitally. But I mean, I suppose for me, one of the questions is, in terms of the process of recognising how that might work. So when you see something that you think, okay, not quite sure how this might sit within how the industry will perceive it, but it's talking to me. Yeah. That heart of it, there's something in it that I just feel is going to work.
Yeah.
How do you then advise an author in terms of working with that kind of material if it's not quite right for the industry, but actually you believe in it? How does the process work for you?
What do you mean by not right for the industry? You mean it's not working for the industry?
It's not working for
in that present time.
In that present time.
Really, it's about, and this is plug. I run writers' retreats, and so lots of people come because they're at that point of going, well, I know this is good. Lots of people are telling me it's good, but I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not getting any traction with this. I'm not getting an agent. I'm not getting published, and it's because quite often they don't understand that special thing that they've got. They're not focusing their pitch, and they're not even focusing the book. They're not pushing and pulling the line, if you like, or the plot if it's fiction, or the progress of it, the transformation if it's non-fiction. They're not understanding where they're pushing from and where they're going to. Once you understand the heart of it, and I call it premise, which is from the lovely James Frey, not the plagiarist. It's just that's where it's figuring out where it's coming from, what you're actually writing, and then when you know that, you can relax and shed some of the other stuff in the edit, and you can focus more on that. So that's my first job. However, I'm working with an author, is to go, this is the story, and I think all good agents and publishers do that. And often when an agent does the deal, passes it on to a publisher, often the publisher will go, I'm going to refine that again. Yeah. This is what the story is. And you can get really, really, very finely in on what the story is. And the closer you get to that, the more exciting and the more successful a book is. And it just gives me goosebumps saying that. I know I sound like such an idiot. But it's true, because it's about telling stories. And that's actually from what I understand about Libraro, it hadn't occurred to me. We've had a couple of conversations about it, but now I'm thinking word of mouth. It's about looking at what your mate thinks, or what someone you value, is someone whose opinion you value, what they think. So it's a sort of broader set of eyes on projects than just agents and publishers. It's a whole lot of other people.
I think that you've just explained that so beautifully. The democratisation of stories, that's exactly it.
But we don't want to hear that your mum or your dad thinks it's great. They might, but that's really not the point. Yeah. Although, that's not the point. It's about people who actually read and who know why the story is good and are able to tell you that. That's a really key part of it. It's not just, this is a great book. No, that doesn't work at a dinner party. What works at a dinner party is the word of mouth thing is, this is an incredible book, it made me think about X, or this is a book that showed, oh my God, who ever thought about that? Yeah. You think about books like We Need to Talk About Kevin. I mean, who'd ever talked about disliking your own child to that extent before? I mean, they're the things that get you going, those kinds of books.
Willingness that the author, from what you're saying, has to have that core point of connection, and they have to ensure that they really know what they want to say.
Yeah.
But from that point onwards, that then enables the agent to co-create. That then enables the publisher to co-create,
Yeah.
and ultimately, in an ideal world, it enables the reader to co-create and
Yeah.
then build that word of mouth.
Yeah. If you don't know where your bones are, you're not putting the right flesh
No.
on it, and you're not actually giving anyone else the opportunity to do that. If you think about all the stages a book goes through, when it gets to an acquisitions meeting, you're talking to the publisher, the sales director's there, the marketing director's there, the publicity director, and the accountant, and you're pitching the book. And if you don't pitch it correctly because you haven't been told, to its bones what the story actually is, then you can't describe it properly. You can't pitch properly. You're probably making everyone's job a lot harder.
Can you share a couple of the questions you might ask that writers might like to ask themselves?
So it's just, it's a bit like, people talk about authenticity and all that sort of thing. I usually fall asleep at that point or go, actually, that word doesn't mean anything anymore. And maybe people will feel like that when they hear what I've got to say, but what that is what's the one thing, like okay, you might need to make quite a long list, but what's the one thing your book really wants to convey? What's the one thing you actually want people to understand by the time they close the book? What do you want them to think, feel, have understood? And it's a statement. So, your premise is a statement about what you want people to understand. So what is it you actually want to say in this book? And you might start a long list and put them up in your fridge and look at that and then just live with that for a bit. And I think you find yourself changing your mind as you go through the list. But it's a really useful exercise, and it might surprise you, because the first answer, I'd say, I don't think I've ever met anyone whose the first answer is the right answer.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So
Yeah.
it's just process.
Yeah.
And demanding of yourself and demanding that quality. We were speaking earlier as well, that knowing that you've got many stages to go through. You've told us a little bit about what an agent really needs from a submission apart from polished prose. So your core answer, I would imagine, is that really important premise, that sense that it knows what it is.
Yeah. This is
else?
what my book is about. This is where I think it sits. These are some comparisons.
Yeah.
We all know the old Jaws meets Alien, was it?
Yeah.
What was the book that was actually used as an example for? Can't remember now. Anyway, but you want comparative titles, and we just want a sense that you're a human being who isn't going to say, my mum and dad think this book is great, because that's really annoying.
Yeah.
And who just knows what the book's about, puts it forward. I've completed the book, or I haven't completed the book. If it's fiction, you should have completed the book before you pitch. If non-fiction, you're just giving a book proposal, and you're just saying, here it is, and try and get sort of your personality and your voice into that letter without being annoying. Don't try and be funny. Just be you, and tell them what you're enclosing. 3 sample chapters, or your book proposal if it's non-fiction.
As the veteran of the publishing industry that you are, you set up a London Writers Club, you co-founded it in 2009, and then your book, Writing a Bestseller, 2014. And obviously now, post-pandemic and all the other stuff that went on, over all these years, have you seen, what are the key shifts that you've seen? For example, things like social media presence, how important is that? And how can writers answer those things?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? I guess the biggest change is that a lot of, when I was commissioning editor, a lot of the sort of what I call the old guard agents have gone, have died, and that's, I was, in awe of them and a bit scared of them. And Carol Blake, who is one of the, beautiful agents, was also very scary to some people. I didn't find it that way. She was happily interviewed for my book. I guess, so that's changed. There are sort of more, a lot more young agents now, it seems, or the young people who are speaking out through social media, so you get to see agents earlier on in their career, which I think is really nice, because they don't have full rosters of authors. The old guard were amazing. They spearheaded the agency without social media. You didn't tend to hear about the younger ones. And they were the ones who were hungrier for manuscripts, you know, so technology has allowed you to see those people and get to them. And a lot of agents are very open with their how you reach them, how you can pitch them on their websites as well, like really, really helpful. So it's very open, it feels open, okay, you still will submit and perhaps not here.
Yeah.
For a long time, and now what's happening is that quite often even agents don't get responses from publishers. It used to be just...
So the ghosting passes on through from one thing to another,
Yeah, that's a real thing that's happening of late, but it's just sheer volume of work. And I think social media, of course, has added something to what we're experiencing, but it's also another workload as well. Authors now have to have a platform. Authors now have to be active on social media, and publishers, they're not doing that work, but their their marketing department is. But you have to be aware of it, and you have to find a way to use it, and be live on there. You know,
that's really interesting. I mean, I think in the end, what we're talking about is building new kinds of communities with agents kind of almost in the middle. I mean, they've always been fielding those, but now they seem to be having to reach out with kind of longer fingers and deeper fingers into a greater number of pies, if that's not too much of a peculiar metaphor. I mean, I know that's a huge topic of conversation and probably too long for our interview, but I mean, obviously the kind of quality versus quantity, that is completely changing, and it's making an agent's role much harder as well, because the slush pile and what's going out there is just becoming harder and harder to navigate. And with that in mind, I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously we've spoken about Libraro a couple of times now, and this kind of triangulation between how the writer and the reader and the industry, how they communicate and connect. And you are absolutely right in saying, of course, it's about stories.
Yeah.
It's about that kind of word of mouth stories, identifying that good book, creating data around it, and then allowing the readers to pass those stories on and through, and that kind of wider network. Is there anything else, based on the conversations we've had, that you'd like to reflect on in terms of that kind of technological opportunity that Libraro offers?
I'm just really excited to see what happens with it. At the moment, my head is buzzing with comparing what Libraro's going to offer with what's already happening in industry, and so I'm swinging between the two and trying to understand how it will be. I mean, it sounds incredibly exciting. I think anything that has more eyes on projects takes the pressure off agents and publishers, but also doesn't forget the quality aspect of it, because that's key, and that's, you know, agents get accused of being gatekeepers all the time, and that is the role. That's why publishers have closed their submissions, and that's why they take through agents. So if the technology can help with that, can add another set of eyes through readers, which in turn will create some sort of data for us, because I think, you know, in publishing we've been pretty scarce on the data front. We know what sells, but how do we know what's going to sell? TikTok.
Absolutely.
Platforms, it doesn't always translate. And with Libraro, it'll be really interesting to see if those readers' eyes and those readers on the buzzer, if those, will translate into sales as well. That could be really exciting.
Well, it's just so wonderful to be able to speak to you, because of course, in the end, the network, the digital network is critical, but actually the human network feeds into it, and that's why people-powered publishing is at the heart of it all. And so, the alliance that we're discussing and how we might work together is hugely exciting to me. Based on what we've discussed, do you see how Libraro might add value to your work in a wider way?
For me, I think having contact and feedback from readers earlier on in the game. I mean, what we're urging authors to do all the time is put some stuff out there, and of course there's a lot of resistance to that because it's my baby, it's my stuff, or it's too early, or someone will steal it, And I get the sense from what you said that Libraro will take care of that. I mean, again, it's like I'm so old school publishing that I can't yet see how that is going to be, but I'm excited to see what it will be. but yeah, having readers engaged earlier on, because publishers, I think, have a love-hate relationship with readers. That's going to piss some people off, because we need readers, yeah, go figure. We need readers, and there's this feeling you don't want to be completely dictated to by the market, because that means there are some things that people don't know about, so they're not going to getting demand created for something that people don't know exists yet, is there? Right? Okay, so it can't be all about the readers, but imagine getting readers' eyes on early enough to showcase some stuff to us that in the industry who we might have passed by that piece of work. The idea that some readers are going, no, actually, this is the stuff, we're ahead of you. We're outside the industry, we're ahead of the game, we're the kids. Get down with the kids and look at what's here. So that could be really interesting.
I love that. And I think, again, it comes back to that point of co-creation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the idea of security is, of course, critical, and the blockchain security that's built to keep writers' work safe, I think, is really important. And again, that's a subject for a much longer conversation. But Jacq, thank you so very much for your time today. It's on a personal level, I'm really excited to be working with you on this, because I do think with the kind of vision and passion you bring to it, it really can help reshape something that is just saying, please, we want to move, we want to shift, but we don't quite know how. Yeah. So these kind of alliances help do that. So thank you so much for your time and energy and enthusiasm today. And from one GPT label powerhouse to another. I'm wishing you a wonderful day, and thank you again.
Thanks, Madeleine. Thank you.